The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, number of topics to get to today. I wanted to first start by talking about the draft. That's going to be the main topic of discussion on this channel moving forward, as we are now in full-fledged draft season here on the Louie T Network. It took long enough, but I've started my process. It feels good, right? I've gotten everything kind of set up. I've gotten into my draft ritual now, so it's starting to flow a little bit, and I'm starting to get into a little bit of a rhythm. And so I'm looking forward to chopping it up and talking draft with you guys and nerding out on the 2026 NFL draft. But before we do that, we're going to continue to talk about this roster, where it is. I think this is going to be an important show because I do this every year where I talk about filling out the roster to 90, right? Because you're not at 53 right now. You're going towards 90. You're heading towards 90. That's the big number. That's what you get to take to these offseason, programs, and this is what you get to take into camp. And so it's not 53. It's not 70 like they talk about with the practice squad and the 17 additional players that they get to have, including the international pathway program player that's also on the roster, in addition to the 16 guys on the practice squad. That 70 number. This is 90. And we have to get to 90. So obviously you have draft picks. We have 6. You have undrafteds after the draft. Don't know. That number varies from year to year. We'll see what happens there. But the number currently is 72, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's so important to actually see the roster. We talk about the roster. We talk about the depth that has been created by the flurry of moves made by Adam Peters and how this team has changed dramatically on paper. Well, let's look at it on paper. Look at the positions, because that's going to give you a much clearer picture of what is needed, what is left to obtain for this roster to really be where we need it to be heading into the 2026 season. So we're going to take a look at the roster after the first wave of free agency, what the Commanders actually look like on paper right now as of March 17th. And then we'll also talk about the top 30 visits that they have. And, that's something that I always do. That's an annual process here on the Louie T Network, is talking about the top 30 visits. I think it is so important to see what they are doing with these visits. You only get 30 of them. Who are they spending them on? I think you're going to see, and we're very, very early in the process. All right. They haven't met with anyone yet. All they have done is set up, meetings with certain players. But I think you're going to see the drastic change from the past 2 years in particular, really last year in particular, and this year, because there's been such a stark contrast in how the team went about free agency and building the roster last year versus this year, where the team was drafting last year versus this year, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about that. You could even go back 2 years ago to their first year here. I think the approach is very different this year already. Now, again, a lot of time between now and probably, I'd say, a month from now, maybe even 3 weeks from now, when they'll be complete with all of these visits, and we'll have a full, 30 visits in front of us. Right now, the number is only 4 confirmed visits for the Commanders. We'll get into that here in a bit. But before we do any of that, I do want to first start by talking about the press conferences that I told you I was going to take a look at and just give you a quick synopsis of what I thought about what these players had to say. So I went back, watched Drake Jackson's presser from March 12th. I didn't even know that existed. I had to go on the website for that because that wasn't on the YouTube channel. And it was only about 5 minutes, so just wanted to hear what Drizzy Drake had to say. Also had a chance to listen to Nick Cross. Remember, I was really interested to see if I had just missed his press conference, or if he had to go or whatever. Somebody in the comment section said John Keim said that he had to go out of town, so he was just in and out signing his deal and had to bolt. So that made a ton of sense because everybody else had pressers and he didn't. So I had a chance to listen to him, and then I also had a chance today to listen to Van Jefferson. So I'm assuming De'Ami Brown and Jerome Ford and those guys are still left, and we'll hear from them at some point. That's the assumption. Again, everybody else has had a chance to speak that has been signed here, so I would assume those two would also be made available to the media. I'm anxious to see what De'Ami has to say because that's quite a journey from leaving here last year, getting that 1 year, $10 million deal, thinking you're going to be an integral part of that Jacksonville Jaguars offense, starting out the season as such, and then very quickly being shunned and cast aside, thrown by the wayside into the scrap heap, basically inactive every single week, and now finding your way back to Washington. It's a very humbling experience, I would assume. The grass isn't always greener. Look, you're $10 million richer if you're De'Ami Brown. Of course, he didn't get all $10 million of that money, but whatever the case may be, he made a lot more money there than he probably was going to make anywhere else. So good for him. But now you're back here in Washington, and I wonder how all of this has kind of went down for him and where his head is. I can't wait to hear him speak if he is made available to the media. But going back to Drizzy Drake, let's talk about him since that one was a little bit further back. Yes, and the Mike Lowry just said that Laramie Tunzel had his Zoom. They're going to probably post that one at some point because I saw a couple of clips on socials talking about the funny moments of his press conference or his Zoom with the media. So Laramie's had a Zoom, and I'm assuming, again, we're going to hear from De'Ami, Jerome Ford, and some of the other guys as well. So looking forward to seeing when those finally hit the airwaves. But Drizzy Drake basically said that the end of last season was an opportunity for him to showcase to the team that you can bring me back. I'm okay. I can still play, and you can bring me back and give me a chance to show that I can be of some, service to this team, which is what he effectively did. Him going out there the final month or so of the season and just showing that, hey, I can be a body if nothing else. Give me a shot to show you that the second round pick might still be somewhere in there. And that's all he's getting. There's no guarantees here for Drake Jackson, right? If he comes to camp and he's just a Jag, he's probably going to get cut. And he may end up on the practice squad, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for us. That's how deep we are at edge rusher. Last year, we needed this guy towards the end of the season. We were fiending to see Drake Jackson. This year, he's an afterthought. If he makes the roster, cool. If he doesn't, I'd love to have him back on the practice squad. So it's going to be important for him to have a strong offseason and an even stronger camp to solidify his roster spot, because he could be one of the guys that ends up being here long term, right? Like if he plays really well, he could get a 2-year deal next year because he signed a 1-year deal this year and he's still super young, like 26 years old. If he comes out, he balls this year. And again, balling in his role looks a lot different than a Daffy Owe or Kaylavon Chason or Dorrance Armstrong balling in their roles, right? Those are more of starter type roles. He is a reserve. If he comes off the bench and gets us 4.5 sacks, that's a tremendous season, given that he's going to play limited reps and snaps. So if he can just show that he's got some ability in the limited reps that he may or may not get, that could go a long way in determining whether he's back with this team after this season or not. But he talked about just getting the opportunity. That's all he really asked for. He hasn't spoken to Durante Jones or any of the defensive staff. This was more of I think, Adam Peters signing, right? This wasn't, oh my God, Durante Jones is like, yeah, I watched him on tape, got to have him back. This was more of an Adam Peters. I know this guy. I have a belief in this guy. It's not going to hurt us to bring him to camp and see if he can get back to his second round pick status. If it doesn't work, we can move on from him. But I brought him here to see if we could put Humpty Dumpty back together again. He's been reassembled. Now let's see if he can work the same way that he once did. If not, we can always move on. So Drake Jackson, happy for the opportunity. He said, I just got to stay healthy. He said, I have to be available. He basically said, without saying, availability is my best ability right now. He's like, anything that they throw at me, I can learn on the fly as long as I'm healthy, but I got to stay healthy. So in his mind, health is the key for him. And it is. That's for any player. It's not just him. So that was Drake Jackson in a nutshell. He's like, I'll do whatever they ask me to do. That rush the quarterback, stop the run, drop into coverage, play linebacker, whatever they need me to do, I'm here to do it. So he said, I want to be versatile. We know that's the name of the game for Durante Jones right now. You get to Nick Cross, and, a lot was made of him being a hometown kid. And, it was funny. I saw a tweet from him from back in 2018 during the draft. He was a lot like us. And look, boy, I tell you, us fans, we're all the same. Even though we have differences, we see things differently, we're all the same, man. He was pissed off back in 2018 that the team drafted Daron Payne. Just like me. All those goddamn on dudes that were available that year in the draft, and you took Daron Payne. And again, not shitting on Daron Payne, but you guys knew how I felt then, and still feel like, there were other options that could have been, better suited for our situation. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. We're talking about something that happened 7 years ago. But it was funny to see him. He said, this team never seems to miss a chance to disappoint me, something to that effect, or this team always disappoints me. And that was on the first round of the draft. It was like, all I could do was laugh and smile, right? Anyway, I digress. So he, was asked about his DC roots and, what coming home meant to him. And he that's like the biggest reason I signed. Like, I love Dan Quinn. I heard a lot of good things about him being a player's coach. Again, everybody loves Dan Quinn. He is beloved throughout the entire league. I don't think there's ever been a negative thing spoken about him. So when people start talking about, what it might be like in Washington, or if someone had some experience with him, it's always positive. So it makes players want to come here. It breaks down that initial wall of guys being a little hesitant to want to sign. And so he talked about, already having a good, feel for Dan Quinn because of talking to other people who have experienced what it's like to either be here or having played under Dan Quinn at some point. And then he talked about, being able to come home, being close to his family, being able to have them watch him at games, growing up, rooting for this team, talking about Sean Taylor and Clinton Portis being his two favorite players and two of the most influential reasons why he got into football in the first place. Part of the reason he's a safety is because of Sean Taylor. He also played running back when he was coming up because of Clinton Portis. So he talked about those things. He talked about his style of play and what he thinks he can bring to the table. He said, I'm a guy that's going to run and hit. He says, I can bring the football back to our sideline, which is music to our ears, because this is a team that has been one of the worst at producing the football over the last 2 years. With Dan Quinn here, you're thinking we're going to get turnovers. I remember the first thing I told you guys when Dan Quinn signed here, I was like, look, I don't know if the defense is going to be good, but I do know we are going to produce the football. We are going to produce turnovers, because if nothing else, Dan Quinn's defenses force turnovers, and we've done nothing of the sort, right? It's been the direct opposite. We've forced no turnovers, and that's been a shock to me. If you ask me the most shocking thing that has happened since Dan Quinn got here, the first thing I would tell you is that this team went to the NFC Championship in 2024. That is the most shocking thing that happened. The second thing I would tell you is that they have not produced the football. They have not forced turnovers. I am still in disbelief that this team has not been able to change that perception since Dan Quinn got here, because the one thing that has always followed Dan Quinn has been the ability to get his defenses to produce the football and force turnovers, and it just hasn't happened here. So having a guy like Nick Cross, bringing in a guy like Amik Robertson, bringing in guys like Kaylavon Chason, and specifically Odafe Owe, who can force fumbles, get the football out, take the ball away. It is important for this defense because we just don't have enough dogs. And Nick Cross is a guy that, fancies himself as being a dog and someone that can take the football away. And so he talked about, being able to do that. He said he talked to the defensive coaches and he sees the plan that they have for him, and it makes him excited. He talked about playing with his former teammate, a Chigakonkwo, they were teaming. He's like, we can't get away from each other. He's like, we, went to Maryland together. And ever since then, it's like we've been joined at the hip. Essentially, they went to Maryland together, practiced against each other every day. They get drafted into the NFL. One goes to the Indianapolis Colts, Nick Cross does. The other goes to the Tennessee Titans, Chigakonkwo. So now they're in the division with one another. They play twice a year against one another. They hit free agency at the same time, and they both end up in Washington together. So he talked about that. It was a pretty cool story, and he's like, he can't wait to compete against him once again. So Nick Cross sounds like a really cool dude. He's from the area. He talked about a joke, a little bit of a rivalry between he and Durante Jones's, their high schools, and they were talking trash to one another. So you see, it's all love, especially when dudes are coming back home. Durante Jones coming back home, Nick Cross coming back home. There's always a sense of pride when guys are from the area. It means a little bit more to them. That's why I loved that our owner, Josh Harris, is from the area, grew up a fan, because it means more to you when you were a fan of that team growing up. It just hits different, and it means more to you. So guys wanted, like, when even I know Cleveland Farrell wasn't shit here, but Clee was a fan of this team growing up. So it makes you want to play harder. It makes you want to win for the city and put on for the city, because you know how much it means to us, you having been a fan of this organization yourself. So I always love it when guys are from here. They grew up, fans of this team and organization. It just means more to us as fans, and it means more to them as well. And then Van Jefferson, basically, there were only two people on the conference call with Van Jefferson. It was literally John Keim and Nikki Javala. Nobody else showed up. So it was only 5 minutes, and really they had to stretch it to 5 minutes. But he basically said that he chose here because it's a great organization. He's heard a lot of good things about the way things are being done here. He's looking for an opportunity. Obviously, he talked about trying to build a rapport with Jaden Daniels, and how, the best way to do that is to get throwing sessions in. And so he said he's going to try to hit him up as soon as he can, and to try to, get in sync with him. In my mind, the whole time he was talking, I'm like, bro, you're not going to make this roster. But I shouldn't say that, because I don't know, right? Injuries could happen. He could outperform some guys. I can't say that. I've seen his game. And while he's a solid NFL receiver, in my mind, if this roster in the receiver position is built the way that it's supposed to be, he has no business cracking the top 7 of this team's wide receiver position. Now, again, things could change. Things could change, and he could end up being one of their top 7 wide receivers this year. But in my mind, I'm like, if everything goes according to plan, you shouldn't be here. Okay. So it was hard for me to take anything that he was saying seriously in terms of him helping this team this season, right? But he's another guy. I will say this: he's another guy with Super Bowl experience, having won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He's another guy that you bring into this locker room and has that pedigree and understands how to win. So if there is another kind of silver lining in this Van Jefferson signing, and if you want to, line it up with some of the other guys that he's brought in here, Leo Chanel, Charles Omenihu, guys that have won a Super Bowl, guys that have been like a Kayvon Chason, Van Jefferson fits in that mold of a guy that has been there and done that. So do have to give him credit. And he is an NFL veteran that has been around the block and seen it all, done it all. And so, again, he is a guy that I don't want to just dismiss. But at the same time, I'm like, if things go according to plan, you shouldn't be here when this roster is trimmed down to 53. And if you cut him, he feels like a guy that should end up on another NFL roster, right? For the first time in a long time, I truly believe that we're going to cut players that are going to end up on NFL rosters. We cut, I don't know where KJ Osborne is, but we cut him, and I don't recall him going anywhere else. We cut Michael Gallup, and he probably went back into retirement. Like, we've cut guys, and they don't end up on other NFL rosters a lot of times. I feel like we're going to cut some players this year that could not will, could end up on other NFL rosters, is we're starting to build a roster that should have a surplus, meaning it should have an overflow of talent to the point where you got to cut guys that should be in the NFL. We're trying to build a roster that looks like that. Hopefully, these are the first steps to doing that. This offseason are the real first steps. 2024 was supposed to be, then we won and we lost sight of the process. We talked about it. A wise man told us success is a hindrance to the process. It is a distraction from the process. That's the exact quote from a wise man. Success is a distraction from the process. And we got distracted in 2024. We're back on track. There are no distractions. And I think this is going to be that foundational offseason where you really start to see this roster changing right before our very eyes. So with that said, those were the press conferences. There'll be more to come. Again, Laramie Tunsil had his. I'm expecting a De'Ami Brown one. I'm expecting a Jerome Ford one at some point. And when those happen, we'll talk about those again. Or we'll talk about those then, excuse me. So top 30 visits. This is important because I'm going to be charting these from here until the draft, basically. And I do this every year because I think it is important for us to see what players they are bringing in. It doesn't tell you who they're going to draft. It just gives you a visual of where their mind might be, like what their thought process is, for me at least. I draw inferences. That's what we do here. So looking at the top 30 visits, 2 years ago, I was able to nail the Commanders draft, right? I was able to give you players that I thought they would draft. And I think we had 9 picks that year, and I think I hit on 5 of the 9, which is insane, right? So these visits are important because it gives you a look into the window of the mind of General Manager Adam Peters and his staff, right? So this is a short list right now. We're early in the process, but I want you to look at the 4 names that are here. I think it is important that you see the difference this year to the previous 2 years. Now, so far, they haven't met with any of these prospects, but they've set up in, these visits, right? Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver from USC. We talked about him extensively yesterday. Talked about his pro day, how well that went, and how he's starting to move up draft boards, and how he is a serious contender for the 7th pick in the draft by the Commanders, right? Romello Height, edge rusher from Texas Tech, the teammate of David Bailey, who we won't be able to draft more likely than not in the first round, but Romello Height probably will be there at 71 in the 3rd round. Again, so you do your homework, you do your due diligence, just in case. He may not get to us at 71, right? But right now, he feels like a 3rd round edge rusher. And if that's the case, you may not be able to get David Bailey, but you may be able to get his teammate who was really good at Texas Tech. Mansour Delane, again, at 7, Commanders doing their due diligence. We've talked about all of these defenders that we'd love to see them draft who may not be available at the time of their pick. You start to look at other positions and other players who have a high profile in this year's draft class. And Mansour Delane is starting to move up boards as well. Going to be interesting to see how he does at the LSU Pro Day. If he tests well there, I just like I talked about with Mekhi Lemon, I think his draft stock is going to go way up, right? And then Ethan K, quarterback out of Rutgers. This is a guy that his name is starting to permeate in league circles. A lot of teams are visiting with this guy. I'm going to have to watch him on tape just to see what they see. Because clearly I've seen 5 teams linked to interviews with him in top 30 visits. Like, he might be in high demand to the point where someone's going to pull the trigger on him the back end of this draft. He won't be undrafted. Someone will, take a 7th round or a 6th round flyer on him. So I've got to check him out, see what he's all about, because The Commanders clearly, and I've said this, and remember, we talked about this already, and I've said this several times to you guys. This is the year that you need to get a developmental quarterback. You were able to kind of, skate on that the last couple of years because you were waiting on Sam Hartman. Last year, Sam Hartman showed you he's not up to the task. Okay. We should be out of the Sam Hartman business now. He can be on a camp body this year, and he can be one of the throwing arm quarterbacks. Cool, right? He can be a camp arm. That's fine. But we got to get a real developmental quarterback in here this year, I believe, right? Because how many more years of Marcus Mariota being signed to one-year deals do you have, in the clip? How many more times is Marcus going to be cool with coming back and signing a one-year deal? I mean, Marcus may be willing to do this for the next 3 years. Who's to say? But at some point, it's going to run its course, and you need a competent backup. And instead of you having to go out and spend $7 to $10 million on a guy, you already got a built-in guy that's backing up, and maybe even to the point where he's playing well enough that someone may be coaxed into giving you a third or a fourth round pick for him. And then you do it again, right? Rinse and repeat. So I think seeing that quarterback's name here lets us know that they are absolutely in the market. And again, I'm drawing an inference. I can't say this for certain, but it to me, if you're putting together a top 30 visits list and one of your first 4 is a guy that we have never heard of. Let me speak for myself. I have never heard of at the quarterback position. Let me check, because I don't think he was invited to the combine either. All right. Let me just check and see. Let me look at the list of combine invites. He wasn't with the. Nope. He wasn't invited to the combine. And so to have that guy as one of the first 4 that you set up a visit with tells me that they're intrigued by that guy and his talent and what they think he may be able to do. But more importantly, they are in the market for a developmental quarterback, which they should be this year. So I love that. But the thing that is striking to me with these visits thus far, and I know it's going to change as more and more visits become available and we start to see this list expand. Last year, they weren't really interested in talking to a lot of the top prospects, right? They were more interested in talking to the guys that were going to be available, or who they thought were going to be available around the place of their pick, right? Around the area of their pick. Remember, we were, late in the first round last year because we went to the NFC Championship game the year prior. So they weren't talking to guys that were going to go, 5th or 6th or 7th that were top 10 type picks. This year, obviously at 7, they're talking to a bevy of guys that are towards the top of the draft. I think that's important to see. And then you're looking at them at the 3rd round mark and, looking at guys there as well. Last year, I remember that they were sniffing around 2nd round guys like Oladejo they had in for a visit. And you're seeing that here with this top 30 visit of Romello Height. And so I think that's something I want to see if it continues when this list expands. Do they have Sonny Styles in for a visit? Do they have Jeremiah Love in for a visit? Or do they just bypass some of those guys? What is the thought process in the 3rd round? Do they bring in some centers, right? That will probably be available at 71. Do they bring in some receivers that could be available at 71? They've already brought in a receiver that is going to be available at 7. Are they going to bring in some that may be available at 71? Will they bring in some guys that could be available in the 5th round? They're at the 147th pick. Will they bring in some guys that might be around in that 6th round? They've got 2 6th round picks, 147, 187. Are they looking at the undrafteds? We've seen in previous years where they're bringing in a bunch of guys that are probably not going to be drafted. And those are some of the guys that they sign as undrafteds. A lot of questions, not a ton of answers right now because the list is so young, but this is going to mature over the next couple of weeks. We'll be here continuing to give you updates as this list grows and talk about the guys that are on it. And eventually we'll get to the point where if they add names to the list, I'm going to watch them before I come talk to you about them so I can give you my thoughts on these players and tell you what I think. So interesting look at the top 30 visits. Now, let's take a look at this. I think this is really big now. So let's extend this out to the roster. So what you see in front of you right now is a look at the Commanders roster right now. All right. 72 players in total, 36 on defense, 33 on offense, 3 on special teams, grand total of 72. Now, excuse me, that number is important because we have 18 open roster spots as of March 17, right? So we'll see how they fill out the other 18. Keep in mind, you've got 6 draft picks that you will have as of right now. That number could decrease. That number could increase depending on movement in the draft. If nothing happens, Adam Peters, Lance Newmark and company stand pat and just take 6 players. Then you have 10 more spots that would be available for undrafteds and any other free agents that they may want to sign in the second wave before free agency, or even the third wave after free agency. And obviously, if you get to 90 and there's a guy that you like that's available after the draft or after free agency, you can always cut someone and then add another player, right? You see that happen all the time as well. But the magic number is 90. So we have some space. So now let's talk about the roster, because I think it's easy to see what is necessary for this team as you look at the roster, right? And there are some conversations that I think we need to have. And I think let's go ahead and save the best conversations for last. So let's just knock the offense out first, because I think the real conversations are on the defensive side of the football. So offensive line wise, you see right now what it looks like. Bunch of futures contract guys, a couple of undrafteds that they, brought in last year, et cetera, et cetera. Laramie Tunzel, Chris Paul, Nick Allegretti, Sam Cosmi, and Josh Connolly Jr. are your starters, presumably, right? I think Chris Paul and Brandon Coleman are going to battle it out for left guard, but Chris Paul is the incumbent. He was the starter last year, so it is his spot to lose. They brought back Trent Scott on a 1-year deal. They brought back Andrew Wiley on a 2-year deal. So you have some veteran backups there. Obviously, Brandon Coleman is one of your premier backups if he doesn't win the starting job. Really, whoever doesn't win the starting job at left guard is going to be a premier backup for us. You have some of these other names: Tyler Cooper, Louie, Julian Good-Jones. I don't know how he's still here, but he is. And Tim McKay is a name that is still interesting, a guy that they brought in as an undrafted out of NC State last year. We'll see if he's able to grow and develop, or if he ends up getting cut again and doesn't make the roster, and they finally just move on from him altogether. So there's quite a bit of depth here on the offensive line, but we clearly see where the deficiency is on the offensive line at center, right? But we already knew that. But seeing it, being that there's really no true backup behind him, none of these other guys double as a center, right? Tim McKay, I believe, played center at NC State, a bit briefly, but he's a guard. He's really a guard by trade. So really, there's no true backups here at center, and that's why I fully believe they're going to draft a center with one of their 6 draft picks this year. But you got depth here in Trent Scott, Brandon Coleman, Andrew Wiley, and we'll see if McKay can, offer some good depth or not. But you're clearly missing center right now as a place where you need some depth. You really need a starter. Allegretti should be providing you with the depth. You need a starter. So center is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb on the offensive line. You then continue on, and we'll start in and then fan our way out. Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota, Sam Hartman. Hartman has to change, right? Again, if you're going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, Sam Hartman can't be one of them. I honestly don't know why you don't have Jeff Driscoll or someone of that ilk here right now. We'll see what they do in the draft. Again, I expect them to add a young quarterback they've tried. It's not for a lack of trying. Remember, they added the guy last year or 2 years ago that he didn't work out. I forget his name and what school he was from. I think he was from like UMass or some shit like that. But matter of fact, let me see if I can track him down. His name. I don't see him. Maybe it was last year's draft. Whatever the case may be, they got to bring in an undrafted quarterback, I believe. You could even draft one late if that floats your boat. But Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels are your two quarterbacks right now, basically. You go to running back. You got Bill. You got Rashad White, Jerome Ford, and Jeremy McNichols. So that's a complete running back room right there. And honestly, barring a Jeremiah Love opportunity, I don't see any additions being made to that room. It looks like that room is fixed as to what it's going to be. And then it just becomes a shuffling of the deck. Who's your second back? Who's your third back? I mean, right now, the assumption is Rashad White's your backup. Jerome Ford is backing him up, and McNichols is just your utility guy, right? You can put him wherever you want. Third, fourth, it really doesn't matter. But McNichols is your, utility guy bringing up the rear of that room. So if Jeremy McNichols is the worst back you have, you're in good shape. You're in pretty good shape. You get to the tight end position, and you see that there are 5 guys currently on the roster. Chigakonkwo, the big addition there. John Bates, the all-time TE2. We talk about him. He doesn't move, right? Ben Sinnott going to get an opportunity, I believe, to be what he's supposed to be in this league, which is an H-back. He is, more of an H-back / fullback type than he is a tight end, I believe. And I think you're going to see that this year in the offense that they're going to run. Colson Yankoff, a guy that they really love out of UCLA, core special teamer, and he showed off some athleticism last year as well. As he continues to develop as a tight end, we'll see if there's really some real true growth in year number 3 for him. And then Lawrence Cager is a guy that is intriguing because of his athleticism, former wide receiver, but he's so undersized. If he doesn't show his ability to put some weight on and keep it on, this is a guy that looks like he's every bit of 220, 225. He's got to get to at least 235, 240 to make himself a real viable threat as a tight end, or else he's just a pass catching, receiver that's a tight end essentially. And again, there's no place on the roster for that. If you can't block, if you can't go down, play some special teams or do something to separate yourself, then there's no place on the roster for him. But right now, he's going to get a chance to compete. That's Ed's guy, Lawrence Cager, right? So then we expand to the receiver position. Luke McCaffrey is your one true slot receiver right now. I think they believe Jalen Lane has a chance to be a slot. They talked about him as a potential slot. We'll see what he's able to do. But Luke right now is your only slot receiver. And, Luke showed flashes last year. So we'll see if anything materializes with him. As you then expand to your X receiver, you got Terry McLaurin, Jalen Lane, Van Jefferson, Nick Nash. A guy that I'm really excited about is Nick Nash. At least for the preseason, he'll make some of these games palatable. And, as you get to the third and fourth quarter and Hartman's in the game and he's throwing the football to some of these guys that won't be here, Nick Nash will be somebody that I think will catch some of your eye out there. I'm a big Nick Nash fan. I was coming out of San Jose State, and want to see if his game has grown at all or if he's still the same guy. I wouldn't dismiss him either. Just saying. Traylon Burks, De'Ami Brown, Ja'Cory Brooks, and Jacoby Jones. So a couple of undrafteds from last year in Ja'Cory Brooks and Jacoby Jones. Don't want to, rule them out either. They've been in the program now for 2 years. Different offense, so they don't have the benefit of being able to say, we're more comfortable in year 2 of the scheme because it's a brand new scheme. So 2 years, 2 new schemes, a little tough on the young guys, but at least they understand what the NFL is all about now, and we'll see if they take a leap or not. It's easy to forget these guys, out of sight, out of mind, when we start talking about the receiver position, but you get a major jump from one of these guys, and who knows, somebody that we expect to be in the mix could be removed from the mix because of one of these young guys stepping up. But this is pretty nasty work to see Treylon Burks as your wide receiver 2 right now. So again, it speaks to, we really need Brandon Ayuk badly, right? Because this is not what we want out here. So that's the offense, though. Depth at tight end, a lot of names at receiver. I don't know if we necessarily love that position. I don't think you can until you get a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. And then I think, things may start to fall into place there. But right now, the receiver position leaves a lot to be desired. But there are some names, but they're just that, names right now. Running back position feels really good. Love the depth there. You're solid at quarterback with, a superstar in Jaden Daniels and a really high-level backup in Marcus Mariota. You've got a really good offensive line and some quality depth. Trent Scott, Brandon Coleman, and Andrew Wiley, or just the loser of the Paul Coleman battle. You want to see if Tim McKay can make himself into a viable option as a backup as well. But you like what you see here on offense, stands for the receiver position right now, which needs to be strengthened, which may happen in the draft, may happen, via free agency, may happen via both, depending on what the thought process is of this staff. But and then special teams, don't want to forget about them. 3 guys there, and that's not going to change, right? Tressway is your holder and your punter. Jake Moody, your place kicker and your kickoff specialist, and Tyler Ott as your long snapper. So go to the defensive side, and this is where the real conversations start to begin. Okay. 36 players on the defensive side right now. So we'll start at the defensive line and then work our way back towards the secondary. So on the D line, you have Dorrance Armstrong as a defensive end, DJ Johnson backing him up. You have edge rushers, Kaylavon Chason and TJ Mag. I forgot all about TJ Mag, to be honest with you. He's on the International Pathway Program, so you don't really have to do anything with him. That's a free roster spot. He can continue to develop. I want to see if he gets any bigger, because remember, we're talking about a guy that was like 215, 220, 225 max as a defensive end. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about right now? When he got in there against the Eagles, I believe it was on, I want to say it was prior to Christmas, that Saturday prior to Christmas, he looked tiny. TJ Mag did. He looked tiny in that game. So I want to see if he can, similar to what I said about Lawrence Cager, I want to see if he can put on some weight and keep it on. So tons of edge rushers here, right? And don't really concern yourself with D-line, nose tackle, all of that stuff. Edge, just think about it as edge and defensive tackle, right? In those terms. So edge rushers, Dorrance Armstrong, DJ Johnson, Kaylavon Chason, and TJ Mag, right? The 2 big names there are Kaylavon Chason and Dorrance Armstrong. As you go to the other side, Drake Jackson, Javonte John Baptiste, Adafi Owe, and Andre Carter. So right there, you have, and when I say edge, I'm talking about guys that can stand up in a 2-point stance and be, multiple chess piece guys that can line up some of everywhere, right? That's when I talk about when I say edge. DN is going to be a little bit different because these guys are more so hand in the dirt, physical edge setters.
guys that can maybe even kick inside versatility-wise. Don't want them standing up in the two-point stance necessarily. They can, but they're more suited to kick inside, not outside, right? They're more likely to reduce inside to a three-tech than they are to be standing up as, a 7, right? Or a 9. You know what I mean? So your edges, Dorrance, Kaylavon Chason, Adafi Owe, Javante John Baptiste, and Drake Jackson are the guys that kind of lead that way right now. The big ones, obviously, are Adafi Owe, Kaylavon Chason, and Dorrance Armstrong, right? Those are the guys that are guaranteed spots. Drake Jackson, Javante John Baptiste, Andre Carter II, and DJ Johnson aren't guaranteed spots. And I guess TJ Mag is also guaranteed a spot on the practice squad, not the active roster. So you get to the D ends now, the defensive ends. And you got Charles Omenihu and Dietrich Wise. So when you combine them with the edges, because I feel like that's one group, you're looking at Dorrance Armstrong, Kaylavon Chason, Adafi Owe, Charles Omenihu, Dietrich Wise. That's 5 guys that are absolutely making this football team. Absolutely making this football team. And then Drake Jackson feels like the first guy with a chance. If they're going to go with 6 edges on the active, 53-man roster, he feels like he's got the first crack at being added to that list of edges, right? Defensive end / edges. And then Javante John Baptiste rounds out that group. And then guys like Andre Carter II, former Duke edge rusher, DJ Johnson, and TJ Mag are guys that feel like practice squad candidates, if nothing else. Javon, as you get to the defensive tackle position, you have Javon Kinlaw, Tim Settle, Deron Payne, Johnny Newton, Shy Tuttle, and Ricky Trulies in my ball. Love this group right here of 6 guys. You got a 6-pack of really, physical, athletic, a good mixture of physical and athletic guys. We saw Ricky Barber's athleticism on the Christmas Day game versus Dallas. I would like to see more of him. Can't wait to watch him this summer to see if he's continued to grow. Shy Tuttle, I know what he is. I've seen him in college at Tennessee, watched him in the NFL, either with the Saints, with the Titans, and the Panthers. I know that he's a, defensive tackle who stops the run. That is his primary goal and role on a football team. He's not going to get to the quarterback very often, but he can collapse the pocket and stop the run. But, your 4 main guys are going to be Javon Kinlaw, Tim Settle, Johnny Newton, and Deron Payne. And I think Shy Tuttle and Ricky Barber are 2 guys that'll be on the practice squad. And I feel good about that. If those guys have to be pulled up, I feel a hell of a lot better than, Sheldon Day and the rest of those dudes. And no shade to Sheldon Day, because he held us down, especially in 2024. But I'm, you know what I'm about. I'm not even going to say it this time. Okay. Because you know where I'm about to go. And my pettiness won't let it go. Right. It won't let me let it go. But we're in a much better spot now, right? Defensive tackle wise. So now you get to the linebackers, and you've got outside backer Kane Madrano, Frankie Louvu, Ale Cajo, and Leo Chanel. So those are your outside backers right now. And then middle linebackers, Jordan McGee and Nick Ballore. Now, the interesting part is right now, this group of 6 could easily be the same 6 that make the roster, because Ale Cajo made it as a surprise last year. He does not have to make it this year. But the other 5 are probably going to make the roster. They're not. I don't think they're going to cut Kane Madrano. Now, he could turn out to be another, one like Dominique Hampton, where they get to year 2 and they realize, all right, he ain't it. And they cut him. Again, you're talking about a 6th-round pick. So there's no doubt that they liked him enough to draft him, but there's no guarantees as a 6th-round pick that you're going to be on the roster the 2nd year after you're drafted. So my guess is Madrano isn't going anywhere, right? But we know Leo Chanel is going to be here. We know Jordan McGee is going to be here. We know Nick Ballore, who is on the final year of the 2-year deal he signed last year. And I think he said he was going to retire after this contract. He's 36 years old, if I'm not mistaken, still playing at a hell of a high level as a core special teamer, one of the best in the league still, if you ask me. He's a fiend. You need those. And then Louie, rounds out the group of guys that we know are going to be here. Medrano feels like he's also going to be here. So Cajo was a surprise last year to make the roster. He does not have to make the roster this year, however, but he could be a guy that's on the practice squad. But I like Ale Cajo. He showed us a lot last year, and I wonder what he's going to look like this summer. But the real conversation, and again, nothing here in these 6 stop you from drafting Sonny Styles, by the way, right? Nothing's here stops you. K. Medrano, Ale Cajo, or both could go. Like if you wanted to keep 5 and you drafted Sonny Styles, all that would mean is Leo Chanel, Nick Ballore, Jordan McGee, Frankie Louie, and Sonny Styles are your 5 linebackers. You just would be cutting K. Medrano and Ale Cajo, right? And that's okay, right? You can cut a 6th-round pick. That's allowed. So this doesn't stop you. This doesn't exclude you from Sonny Styles at 7 if he's available. All right. Now you get to the really interesting part, and the place where I feel like there are a lot of question marks, more questions than answers right now. So let's start at cornerback, boundary. And this is nasty. Cover your eyes. All right. If you have a weak stomach or if you're faint of heart, cover your eyes, plug your ears, because this is very disturbing. All right. The images that you're looking at right now, the sounds that are about to come out of my mouth are very, very disturbing. At boundary corner, we have Trey Amos, Darius Rush, Carlin Vigors at one boundary corner. Carlin, excuse me, I don't want any contact Vigors, right? Or as I called him last year, Carlin contact averse Vigors. On the other boundary, we have Mikey Too Short Sainristil and Trey Hawkins, the third, formerly of my alma mater, Old Dominion. That is as nasty as it gets, folks. Now, I love me some Mikey. And while I want him on the field, I already told you my reservations that I have of him as a boundary corner. Again, he fits this scheme outside. I don't worry about him as much in this scheme outside, but I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't want a replacement for him out there, someone with a little bit more height and length at the position. But it's probably going to be Mikey Sainristil starting opposite of Trey Amos, and I'm okay with that, right? I don't have a choice, but I'm okay with that. But the depth behind these guys is incredibly nasty. I mean, Darius Rush, Trey Hawkins, and Carlin Vigors. You might as well take us out back one by one and execute us if this is the group that we're taking into the season, which it's not. Okay, it's not. But it doesn't get much nastier than that. So when you look at the secondary, it is abundantly clear where the help is needed. As we look at the roster, there's 72 players. It's clear where they have to add, right? Again, it's not like we didn't already know this. We've been talking about this, but still seeing it with your own eyes and then hearing it, it's totally different, and it brings a sense of urgency to it, right? That maybe didn't exist prior. I'm not done yet, by the way. The nastiness continues. All right. So you go to the slot, and this is a real conversation because someone had brought this up earlier about Quan Martin or Jartavius Martin. We'll call him Quan. We'll call him Quan for now because Jartavius plays safety. Quan may play the slot. We'll see. Now, Amik Robertson right now is plugged in as a slot, which I think he's going to play. Backing him up is one Quan Martin. So Quan Martin
there's a conversation out there floating around that his safety privileges have been revoked and he has been moved to slot, corner, basically, which he played a ton of slot at Illinois, which is often the job of a free safety, especially in college. In the NFL as well, you'll see slots drop down or safeties drop down over the slot if they're capable of doing so, depending on the scheme, and, play a little bit of nickel. And Quan was really adept at that in college. We really haven't seen him do that ever since in his rookie season. He dropped over the slot in front of Tyreek Hill, and right off the snap, Tyreek ran past him and put his hand up like Randy Moss. Hey, throw me the rock. 3 steps off the line of scrimmage. We ain't seen him in the slot since, really, after that. Maybe Quan can redeem himself and find a way to make himself relevant as a nickel, as a slot on this team. Who knows? This is his last chance to salvage himself as a second-round pick. Let's see if he can't remake himself into a slot. But clearly, there is a need at cornerback. I wonder if they see Quan as a corner now, as a nickel, or if he's still part of the safety group. That's a real question, because if they see Quan as a corner now, not as a safety, but as a nickel, and his primary job is as a nickel corner, then you would have 4 corners now, and you would only need 1, technically speaking, right? Technically speaking, that changes the count. That I haven't thought about that, but when you look at it from that perspective, because again, you're keeping 5 safeties and you're keeping 5 corners more likely than not. That's usually, again, this group has kept 6 safeties before. Their first year here, they kept 6 safeties, but you could do that because the roster was ass. You had the space and the opportunity to keep 6 safeties, to keep 7 receivers, because what else were you going to keep? We didn't have shit in 2024. The roster's different now. We're looking for space for certain positions in case you love a guy. We're looking for space. We don't have it right now, if the numbers are to work out the way that we think they're going to work out. And that's also assuming health. So that's interesting if Quan Martin is looked upon as a corner now and not a safety. Just a little food for thought. You do the dishes, right? As you travel to the safety position, you have Will Harris, Jeremy Reeves, Quantrez Knight, Nick Cross, Percy Butler, Tyler Owens, and Robert McDaniel. So this group is sort of loaded here, right? Loaded in the sense that there's a number of names, and the big thing here is most of these guys either hold value within the staff, hold value with the staff, and have a role carved out for themselves within the roster, or they were brought here by this group, which is important. Because if I didn't bring you here, it's easy for me to cut bait, right? Will Harris was signed as a free agent last year. He's going to be on this team. As a matter of fact, if they don't do anything else, Will Harris is your starting free safety, right? Jeremy Reeves, we all know All-Pro Revo ain't going nowhere, core special teamer, and even got some run on defense last year, right? So, and we've seen his defensive role continue to expand. I think we'd like that to shrink a little bit, right? And just have him focus on being the best special teams player that he can. But we know Jeremy Reeves isn't going anywhere. So that's 2, right? Nick Cross was brought in here on that 2-year deal to start as our strong safety. Again, I told you, he'll be playing the role of shucks, I forgot his name. I said it on one of the other videos. I'm blanking on his name right now, but Nick Cross is going to be our starting strong safety in this defense. Sort of a rover where he'll be down by the line of scrimmage, kind of hovering in that hook zone area, just being a nuisance around the football, being physical, somewhat of an enforcer. So Nick Cross gives you 3. Percy Butler signed a 2-year deal last year as a core special teamer. So that's a guy that they absolutely love on specials. Tyler Owens has carved out a niche for himself as a core special teamer now. Does Durante Jones see a role for him as a defender where they can actually utilize his athleticism? That remains to be seen. And then Robert McDaniel is a guy they brought in as an undrafted to play that Jeremy Chin role. Has he developed in year 2 enough to where he becomes a factor in this conversation, or is he just a jag and ends up getting cut for good this year, or just stashed away on the practice squad again and continuing to develop? We will see. But safety is an interesting position. I don't think they're going to do anything else at safety this year because you've already got 5 guys between Will Harris, Jeremy Reeves, Nick Cross, Percy Butler, and Tyler Owens. Now, is Owens a lot? Does he have to be here? No. And I would advocate that you do. This is a deep safety draft class. I would advocate that you do add a safety because Will Harris won't be here next year. Percy Butler, chances are he won't be here next year. They could also bring him back. They love him on special teams, and they could also work out a deal to bring him back on another 1-year, 2-year deal, whatever. But this is the last year of his deal. Tyler Owens doesn't have to be here next year. So when you look around, I think Reeves, this is his last year of the deal that they signed him to. So again, and they may love him, bring him back again, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, you're looking at a position group that could look vastly different next year with a bunch of guys on expiring contracts. What better way to prepare yourself for that than to bring in a young safety that can be developing? He's not going to play this year, right? But you could have him developing as a late round draft pick that you cut and stash away on your practice squad, or that makes the team. You cut Tyler Owens, you put him on the practice squad and keep your draft pick. Because if you draft a guy, more likely than not, he's going to make your team, right? So we only got 6 picks. All 6 of these boys making our squad. Even the 7th round pick is probably going to make the team. That's just where we at right now in our roster building, especially when you only got 6 picks. If you got 12 picks and you got 3 7th rounders, okay, your 3 7th rounders don't have to make the team. One of them might. All 3 of them don't have to. We got 6 picks, bro. All 6 of these dudes are probably making the squad. So there's a chance you could draft safety. Tyler Owens could be the odd man out, right? So just looking at the secondary in particular, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think you could add a safety. You definitely need to add at least 1 corner, possibly 2. I'm of the mindset that you need to add 2 because I don't look at Quan Martin as a viable corner option right now. That may be his future in this league, and he may turn out to be a damn good slot corner, right? We may go, shit, Quan out here D'ing dudes up, right? Locking dudes up. But we might also say Quan just as ass at nickel as he is at safety. Get him the hell off our field and off our team. So I think you need 2 corners. And again, Trey Amos, Mike Sainristil, Trey Hawkins, Darius Rush, and Carlin Viggers. This is TVMA. Viewer discretion is advised, right? Brief nudity, strong sexual scenes. Like, this is nasty right here. This is soft porn is what this is. Darius Rush, Carlin Viggers, and Trey Hawkins. This shit is nasty. We've got to do something. This is not okay. There's a second wave of corners that are available. Grab you one and then draft another one and let's go to work. So they got to do something. That's what this says to me is defensive line, we're good. Linebacker, if they do nothing else, I can't say that we're good at linebacker. I can say that we're athletic, and I'm intrigued by Jordan McGee, Kane Madrano in this defensive scheme. What does Frankie Louvu look like in his final year of his deal in a new defensive scheme? Leo Chanel coming up. Like, I'm intrigued. We don't have to do anything. We got 6 linebackers. Let's see what they look like. Really 5. Nick Bellore ain't playing no defense. He's here for special teams purposes only, right? So, linebacker, I'm intrigued. If you do nothing else, I'm good. I'm good. D-line, we're set up for success. Secondary, big question mark. You got 3 corners right now. 3 corners. You got nothing on the boundary. Trey Amos and Mikey Samerstill. And we still are debating whether or not we're okay with Mikey outside. God forbid right now that anything happens to any of our boundary corners. Amik Robertson would then have to go outside. What the hell do you do at nickel at that point? This is the shit I'm talking about. You got it. And again, they're going to do something. Like Adam Peters, Lance Newmark, you know, they're going to take care of this. I've already told you, cornerback and center are the 2 positions that they're absolutely drafting this year. I think receiver is starting to become the 3rd that I expect them to select. Just looking at this grid, right? We looked at the receiver position and we're like, this isn't okay, right? Traylon Burks as your Z is not okay. It is not okay. And again, we expect that to change upon the release of Brandon Ayuk. But until that happens, Traylon Burks is penciled in as your Z receiver. That is not, I repeat, not okay. Luke McCaffrey is your starting slot, potentially. I can't say that it's not okay. I just can't say that I am okay with that. Right? I ain't mad at it, but I'm damn sure not glad at it. So again, we need to continue to add to the receiver position. You clearly need to add cornerback. And I'm not opposed to adding a safety either. And obviously you have to add a center. This makes it abundantly clear when you stare at it. Center, corner, receiver, safety. Anything else is extra. Any other positions you decide to grab, extra. You want to grab an extra offensive tackle for development purposes? Cool. I'm not upset. I don't love Trent Scott as my backup left tackle. I don't love Andrew Wiley having to be my backup left tackle. Brandon Coleman, if he's starting, is your best other option at left tackle. But if he's starting at guard, you're screwed. It means Andrew Wiley probably has to go in the game. And nobody wants to see that. Beef, who want that? Not I. So you see the positions that need work up close and personal. Receiver, center, corner, safety, anything else, I'm cool with. But those 4 positions have to be addressed via free agency, the second wave, and or the draft. And again, we've got 18 roster spots available. Trust me, they're going to take care of them, right? They're going to take care of them. So I digress. Let's get to the comment section and then we will get out of here. Voices of Martians. Thank you for being a member for 7 months. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Happy St. Patrick's Day, Lou. God be with you. Happy St. Patty's Day, my man. Feel like the best time for St. Patrick's Day is a Friday. The best day of the week is a Friday. Go out, have some drinks. I remember when I first moved to Hampton, before I moved here, my first St. Patrick's Day was like on a Friday. And I was out on the town. I was bar hopping by myself. I was out bar hopping. It wasn't quite March Madness, I don't think. I think we were in the tournaments, like we were in the conference tournaments, if I'm not mistaken, that year. And I was just going from bar to bar. And I don't even move like that for real. But I was in my bag, my St. Patty's Day bag that year, bruh. Good times. Good times. I'd actually like to do that again. That was fun. B2 Trey. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. B2 Trey writes, why nobody talking about Chiggy plus Ben Steele at coach? Also, LT got them boys in the lab together. O-line. Can't wait to see the Great Wall of Columbia. LOL. It was pretty cool. I know you guys saw, and I can't wait for the next Commanders log. You know, I know they're putting that together as we speak. But I love the embrace, the love that the staff and like DQ has fostered an environment that when a guy gets signed, they're all waiting in the vestibule for them. They walk in, and it's just this immediate showering of love, right? And excitement and energy. When Laramie walked in, first dude he dapped up is his new offensive line coach, who was his assistant line coach last year, Darnell Stapleton. Gave him a big ass hug and dap, and it was just so much energy. I can't wait to watch it. It was just, you could tell Laramie was excited to get that deal done, get that money in his pocket. I'm gonna make sure I tell Laramie, hey, don't spend it all at once, bruh. You know, Laramie loves to go out, have a good time. Don't spend it all at once, bruh. But really, I'm glad that they've been able to build this offensive line into what I think it's going to become, right? Because you're getting Josh Conley Jr. in year 2. I think he's going to, take a massive step forward. You're getting a healthy Sam Cosmi, right? Like we saw flashes of Cosmi last year getting back to it, but there was also some rust that he had to knock off. And now he's going to have a full offseason of working next to, Josh Conley Jr. They can start to form a bond over there on that right side. We got to figure out center, right? Because that's the brains, the nervous system of the operation. You got to figure out left guard, and then you got Laramie Tunzel. Whomever is playing left guard is going to be made better by Laramie Tunzel. So Chris Paul and Laramie Tunzel did a great job in the run game last year together. We'll see if that pairing is, reassembled again this year, or if Coleman is inserted into that mix, and see what those two can do next to one another. But Tunzel on the little brief snippet of his Zoom presser that I saw, he's advocating for guys to come out and train with him instead of training with the team. I'm like, no, Larry, don't do that. Everybody ain't getting the fat ass check that you getting and can't afford to not be at these OTAs and these voluntaries. They need to be with the team. You can do your thing. Let these boys, do what they're supposed to do here at the team facility. But he was like, yo, you see my back? I got a big back. I can show him how to get a big back. I'm like, whoa, easy, bro. But he started laughing, and I'm just excited that he's going to be back with this group, because his influence on them, it's an all-pro we talking about. He got robbed of being an all-pro last year. His influence on them, I think, is tremendous. It's tremendous. And Chiggy with Coach Ben Steele. I mean, we talked about Ben Steele potentially unlocking Ben Sinnott. What about him unlocking Chig Okonkwo? We saw what Ben Steele was able to do in Arizona, for one of the best tight ends now in football. Maybe he can do the same thing for Chig Okonkwo. So you might be right. There's not enough conversation surrounding that pairing of Chiggy with Ben Steele, but we may see why they were adamant about adding Ben Steele to this mix once they promoted our tight ends coach, David Rye, to offensive pass game coordinator. We see why they made a beeline for Ben Steele. We may see that in year 1 with Chig Okonkwo. And Chig talking reckless. I love it. Chig talking like he finna go out here and have, 72 catches for 1,000 yards or 942 yards and 7 tutties. Like, he talking reckless. Like he about to assault the league on some Trey McBride shit. Like, he talking like he really one of them tight ends. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, he talking like he on that level. We're going to see. We know Jaden loves getting the ball to the tight end, so it's not like he's in a place where he won't get an opportunity. That's for sure. Drew, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Drew writes, big fan of the Nick Cross pickup, enforcer. He's absolutely a guy that will come up and hit you. Plays with a level of physicality that I felt like we lacked last year, frankly. Remember Jordan Love was running over our defenders in the secondary, right? He ran over Will Harris. He ran over Trey Amos. Like, we got a guy out here who don't even like running the ball, who ain't even like that. Making dudes miss, bouncing off of guys, running and lowering the shoulder on dudes and running them over. Like, we was ass in the secondary last year. We weren't physical. If you ain't going to be physical, then you at least need to be taking the football away. We didn't take it away. We didn't do anything to deter teams from just doing whatever the hell they wanted to do to our secondary. I think that's all about to change. All about to change. And guys like Nick Cross are going to be at the forefront of that, I believe. Renell Winchester, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Renell Winchester writes, will we keep Payne? There are 11 D lineman players listed. Of course we're keeping him. It's not going anywhere. There are 11 defensive linemen. They're keeping the number is probably 10. My guess is you keep 4 D tackles and 6 defensive ends. If they wanted to, they could keep 5 and 5, right? If they're really smitten with one of the defensive tackles, Barber or Tuttle, they could keep 5 of those. And then, like, you don't have to keep a 6th defensive end. That's not mandatory, right? You could keep 9 and keep 4 defensive tackles. Like, if you wanted to trim off some fat and add it to another position, you could keep 9. You don't have to keep a 6th defensive end. You could keep 5. Because we know the 5 right now, right? Charles Omenihu, Dietrich Wise, Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Adafi Owe, Kaylavon Chason. We know the 5. The question is there a 6th? Does Drizzy Drake Jackson and or Javonte John Baptiste pierce the 53-man roster? So really the number is 9. It could get to 10 if you want to add an additional defensive tackle, Shy Tuttle or Ricky Barber, or you want to add a 6th defensive end, Javonte John Baptiste or Drizzy Drake Jackson. So really the number is 9. And Daron Payne is squarely at the forefront of that 9. He is entrenched in that 9. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about whether or not he's on this roster. Unless somebody makes you a ridiculous offer that you can't refuse in the summertime. And you got somebody else balling at defensive tackle, to the point where you feel comfortable enough. Or, and this is something that I haven't brought up, but I now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think drafting a defensive tackle is the worst thing in the world this year either. Now that I think about it, you probably should draft a defensive tackle this year. If Daron's not going to be here next year, more likely than not, and again, we don't know, because this is payday Payne, right? This offseason is payday Payne.
Payday Payne.
And we know what payday Payne does. We know what payday Payne does. So this, in all likelihood, is his last year here, but it doesn't have to be. But in the event that it is, he's not going to be here next year. Shy Tuttle doesn't have to be here next year. Again, Ricky Barber may not be here after this summer. Who's to say? This is a totally different room. You got Javon Kinlaw going into the last year of his deal next year. You got Johnny Newton, if they don't pick up his 5th-year option, which they'll have to make a decision on next year, whether or not they want to pick up his 5th-year option. And that depends on how he plays this year. But I don't think he's a starter in this league, is Johnny Newton, whether you pick it up or not. If he's not starting, you're not picking up his 5th-year option because you're not paying him that money. So, or excuse me, he was a 2nd-round pick. There is no 5th-year option. So Johnny Newton would be going into his last year of his deal next year. Excuse me. He was not a 1st-round pick. So Newton would be going into the last year of his deal. Kinlaw would be going into the last year of his deal next year. There could be no Payne, no Shy Tuttle. I would advocate for spending one of your 6 picks on a defensive tackle. I think this year's draft is more about depth for the future than it is frontline starters. This is not a high-level talent draft. To me, this is a this is a cog draft, meaning you get cogs in the machine, guys that are worker bees. That's what you get in this year's draft. At 7, we got a chance to get a starter. At 71, we got a chance to get a starter. After that, I think you're getting guys that, you could draft a 5th-round center and he could turn into a starter, but for the most part, you're getting worker bees. So I'm all for drafting a corner in this draft. If you want a developmental one later in the draft, 5th, 6th round, 7th round, I'm all for drafting a developmental edge rusher. Again, I'm all for drafting a developmental safety. I talked about that earlier when we looked at the roster. I'm for drafting a developmental defensive tackle in the 5th round, like a Tim Settle, right? Like we drafted that year in 2018 with Deron Payne. We also drafted Tim Settle. I'm okay with drafting a guy later in the draft that can step in next year and be ready to give you some quality snaps. I think defensive tackle is another one to put on the list. Now that you bring up Deron Payne, he's not going anywhere, but you can start looking towards the future. You should. Good organizations do. Commander Ho, thank you for being a member for 29 months. Who writes, you wanted Cam Taylor-Britt. He just signed with the Colts. Well, that was my favorite cornerback available left. That's a good spot for him too. That's a good fit for him in Indy. But clearly, again, they're looking for a certain type. And they made it clear. There were a lot of corners available. And the one that they picked out of the entire group speaks volumes. Speaks volumes. They didn't want a guy that lacked focus, like, what my favorite corner on the market this year, which was Reek Woolen, who lacks focus. Every time you look up, he's distracted, looking to the sideline, trying to get the call, not paying attention, and then somebody runs by him and catches a touchdown, right? They're not looking for that lack of focus. A guy that was able to, willing to put his team in a tough spot in the NFC Championship game. They're getting off the field and he wants to taunt the sidelines. Clearly, that's not what they were looking for. Cam Taylor-Britt gave us bulletin board material, then got cooked in the game, then got cooked all that season, and then got benched last year. Clearly, they're not looking for that kind of player, right? They made it abundantly clear that they wanted a dog. Irregardless of height, we want a dog. The guy that his tape jumps out at us and he looks the part of a commander. That's why they went out and signed Amik Robertson. So we keep focusing on height and length, and they don't give a shit. Clearly, they don't give a shit about none of that. What's your play style? What's your demeanor? How you get after it? So, let me see what's left out there at the cornerback position. Now, if they wanted him, he was out there. They clearly didn't want him. So, and they've spoken on the cornerback position, but Nashawn Wright's gone, Jalen Watson's gone, Jamel Dean's gone, Alontae Taylor's gone, Josh Job's gone. We got Amik Robertson, Cordell Flott's gone, Monteric Brown is gone, Cam Taylor-Britt is now gone. If what you're telling me is accurate, Greg Newsome is gone, Tariq Woolen is gone, Kobe Durant is still available, I believe. He's still available, and he fits what they've done this offseason, but I could be wrong. He could have already signed with somebody. Roger McQuarrie is gone. Benjamin St. Juste, who we didn't want back anyway, is gone. Fat Moreau is still out there. Ugh, that's nasty. And Trayvon Diggs, I think, is still out there, and I'm good on him as well. So Another one bites the dust if what you're saying is accurate. Another one bites the dust if Cam Taylor-Britt is no longer available. A1, stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. You know what to do. Show A1 some love. Welcome him with open arms. Glad to have you back as a part of the MOBB. Welcome to the squad. A1 9385. Commander Ho, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, with 67 million left in cap space, do you think we'll add to the secondary before the draft? If so, who would you like them to go after? I do. I expect them to add to the secondary. Yes, I do. I don't think he's done. You're basically a month out from the draft, a little bit over a month away from the draft. And you're heading into the second wave of free agency now. So things are going to settle down. This is when you get the super cheap deals for guys that, you know, are looking for work, and you start scouring the market for those 1-year deals on guys who are looking to prove it. I think they're going to add, this is when you add a Jonathan Jones, right? Like they did last year. This is when you do that. I think 2 years ago in 2024, they added the Pierre, right? Remember? They added the cornerback, Pierre. They ended up cutting him in camp, but they added him right around this time. This is the time when you add one of those guys. I expect them to add one of those type of corners to the mix. Again, a Jacoby Durant is to me the best guy available. Let me see if he's still available right now, because these signings are crazy. Guys end up signing, deals with teams, and it's easy to lose track of, where guys are or aren't. So let's see if he is still available. As that probably is the best cornerback available. And I was somebody had asked about him earlier, and I'm like, I like Jacoby Durant, but what are we trying to field? The shortest cornerback squad ever? Let's see. So Alontae Taylor, Jalen Watson, Cordell Flott, Jamel Dean, Eric Stokes, Josh Jobe, D. Alford, Amik Robertson, Tariq Woolen, Greg Newsome, Benjamin St. Juste. James Pierre was the dude I was talking about that we had signed 2 years ago. Joshua Williams, Cam Lewis, Chidobe Awuzie, Nate Hobbs. Yeah, Jacoby Durant is a Cowboy. So even that's not an option for us. He signed with Dallas. Nashawn Wright gone, Rock Yassin, Elijah Hicks. So at this point now, it doesn't make sense to look at who's signed, is who's left. All right. Who is left at the cornerback position? Oh, Marshawn Lattimore is available. Now I'm playing. L'Jarius Sneed is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb, but clearly, if they were interested, they would have already been in contact with him. He's out there. We'll see if there's a market for him. Trayvon Diggs, as I mentioned, is still available. Jeff Okudah, who was in Minnesota with our with our defensive coordinator, Durante Jones, is still available. That's a name to keep an eye on. I could see them bringing in a Jeff Okudah. Not going to cost you a lot of money. And he's familiar with the scheme. Let's see. Cam Taylor-Britt just signed with the Colts, if what I was told is accurate. Fab Moreau is available. Michael Davis. Vato Davis is available. Y'all interested in Vato Davis? Seconds of that? I kid. One of y'all favorite players, man. Ed's favorite cornerback, Antonio Hamilton, is still available. So yeah, there's not a lot here, man. I mean, there's some names here that you can get by with, but there's not a lot here. So to narrow this list down, I would tell you that you can't rule out Fab Moreau because of his connection to Durante Jones, even though from what I've seen this offseason, connection to Durante Jones means nothing. They didn't bring in a single Viking player who had a connection to Durante Jones. So we don't need to keep using that lazy narrative as to why a guy might end up here, because they haven't done that yet. Right? They had ample opportunities to bring along guys that were in Minnesota with Durante Jones, and they haven't. They haven't done that. So I'm to assume that that's not something that is a major factor in their decision-making process, but you don't want to rule it out either. So Antonio Hamilton was here last year. He could easily be back again this year. I wouldn't hate that either, by the way. But I mean, you can do better than that. He's 33 years old. I don't want a 33-year-old corner. All right. Thank you. No thanks. Fab Moreau is about to be 32 years old. I'm good. I'm good. So to me, the list is like this. I wouldn't mind a Rasul Douglas, even though he's 31 and a half. That's a ball hawking safe corner who would fit in this scheme because you're basically playing top down. He can do that. He can do that. So I wouldn't mind him despite the age. But if you want to go younger, Jeff Okudah, former first-round pick, was in Minnesota. That has to be a name that you consider. L'Jarius Sneed is another name that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, those are the three names right now that I think kind of stand out to me. Darion Kendrick is very interesting too. Former Ram corner. I like him a lot. So that's another cheap guy you could get. Caillou Blue Kelly, who was here before in Washington. I thought he had some moments with the Raiders last year. That's another name to keep an eye on. There's a number of cheap guys that you could bring in here that can give you some depth. But you have to draft a corner. You that's not optional. You have to draft a corner. But they're going to add somebody. They're going to add somebody. Either prior to or after the draft, because what you have to remember is there's also a phase 3 of free agency that comes after the draft. Right now, teams are going to hold on to some stuff because they don't know what they're going to get in the draft. You come away with, two corners that you didn't think you were going to get in the draft, and all of a sudden, one or two guys that were on your roster become expendable. You move on from them. So there's still a third wave of free agency that will take place, and the Commanders could, indulge in that, but that shouldn't stop you from signing a guy right now, right? To prepare yourself in case nothing shakes free in wave 3 of free agency, you already straight. Because you could always just go back and cut a guy, right? You can always go back and cut a guy or take all these guys to camp, which that's what you're going to ultimately do. Take 90 guys to camp and then make a decision. Let everybody compete and may the best men win. And then you put your roster together. So I expect them to add someone to this roster at the cornerback position before the draft. I do. A1, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for your generosity, man. Really, truly do appreciate you. And thank you for being the newest member of the MOBB. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. What up, Lou? What's up, A1? Hope you and the fam are doing good. Likewise. Again, truly do appreciate you. Keep my family in prayer. My grandfather passed away last weekend at 94. Man, he lived a life. I bet he had some stories to tell, man. My condolences out to you and the family. Prayers are going up. That means blessings are coming down to you and yours, my guy. So I assume that you guys were close. So strength is important in times like this, right? It's okay to cry. Please, by all means, do that. If that emotion hits you, let it out. But the strength will come in numbers. And your family, rallying together and coming together as one and being there for one another. That's what's important in times like this. You guys lean on one another. Y'all talk about the good times, relive some of the funny moments that, you guys were able to share with him in his 94 years of life. And that'll help you get through and continue to push forward, right? Which is what he would have wanted you guys to do. He was a Cowboys fan. I know the struggle. I know the struggle of someone that you're super close to being a Cowboys fan. My dad is a Cowboys fan. And of course, I rep the squad. Needless to say, I'm going to miss joking with him and hearing him rant about the Cowboys. Absolutely. And again, remember those good times. I'm pretty sure y'all had a bunch of those sessions where you either was, giving him a hard time, or he was ribbing you, or you would just listen to him vent and rant about Jerry Jones and how bad the Cowboys are, how they'll never win, and this, that, and the third. So yeah. And it'll hit you again when the season comes, right? You'll be in a place of peace, and then boom, the season comes, and the first time Dallas does something dumb or we play Dallas, it's gonna hit you all over again, and that wound is gonna become fresh again. So you just have to mentally prepare yourself for that. But you'll get through it because you're a strong individual, right? And we all are. And so you'll persevere, but it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, and there'll be times where it's gonna hit you all at once again, those emotions. But you'll stay strong. You'll stay strong. But blessings to you and your family, man. Prayers are going up. Indeed. So that is going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Hopefully, we'll have some prospects to start breaking down. I don't know if I want to have all of them to break down at once, or if I want to do it in sections. I may break them down in like quadrants to give more content instead of just having one big show on the receivers. Maybe I'll break them down and then have one big show to close the chapter on that position and then move on to the next position. So I think I'm going to start doing that. And maybe you may get that as early as tomorrow. No later than Thursday, we will start these receivers and start talking about them and giving you my sense of where they are in the process. So I shouldn't say that, because I want to rank them first before I start talking about, because rankings change. I could start out with this guy at 6, and then I watch another guy later on and I'm like, oh no, he's better than him, and so now this guy's down to 7. You know how these lists can become fluid. So maybe I need to watch them all first, then I can break them down. I'll figure it out. But in any event, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys later on. If anything happens with this team, I'll be back. If not, I'll probably see you guys tomorrow. Until then, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. You guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.